Hello and welcome to the podcast Emotional Intelligence, your greatest asset and key to success. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Carlaccio, coming to you from the greater New Haven, Connecticut area. As a positive intelligence or PQ coach, I'm committed to helping people develop both emotional intelligence and mental fitness. You'll come to regard problems as situations that help you learn and grow. PQ is a way of being and doing in the world that enables you to develop and sustain a positive relationship with yourself and others, at home, at work, and everywhere in between. Please subscribe to this podcast and tap the like button so more people can enjoy the benefits of PQ. And now, here's the show. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast Emotional Intelligence. Thank you very much for being here with us today. And I'm very excited. We're going to talk about happiness. And I think that's a fraught term. I don't think that we really maybe agree on what it means to be happy. And so my guest, Julie Cowles, and I are going to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to just introduce her. She's wonderful. I just met her recently, and she's in Berkeley, California. At least that's where your phone number says you're from. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is Julie. Hold on here. I just lost your intro. So let me pull it up again. And Julie is a former therapist turned spiritual life coach, intuitive guide, and a writer dedicated to helping individuals reconnect with their true, authentic selves. And I think that's what we try to do on this podcast as well, Julie. She has a degree in psychology from the University of Michigan and a Master of Social Work from UCLA. She has extensive experience working in the U.S. and abroad with vulnerable populations, including those with serious mental illnesses, addictions, and traumatized children and their parents. That must be incredibly profound work, Julie. And after an intense spiritual awakening in 2020, she now focuses her expertise on coaching women and other healers using a variety of modalities, including psychological tools, guided meditations, contemplative journaling, tarot, and plant medicine. And Julie, I really wish you were here with me in Connecticut or that I was with you in Berkeley. We have so much in common. Her newest offering is a group program called Midlife Mystic for midlife moms on a spiritual journey to reclaim their clarity, happiness, and sovereignty. Julie is currently in training to become an ordained minister at a plant medicine church called Sacred Garden Community in Berkeley, California, where she resides with her 16-year-old daughter, husband, and 2 kitty cats. And I will put Julie's information in the show notes so that you will have that. And Julie, thank you for coming. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm very glad to be in this space.
Yeah. So I'm just going to start with a couple of comments. I believe I mentioned it last week. There's a book called The New Happy, and the woman is Stephanie Harrison. She just published it this year. The book is literally brand new. And I wanted to just read a couple of things from the book because I think that might be a way to start our conversation. So she said that this old happy, apparently, that the paradigm we're kind of stuck in, and she's trying to get us out of that paradigm and show us a new way. And that's what the book is about. But she said from a very early age, we're conditioned for these old beliefs about our choices and our behavior. And we rarely question them or challenge them. And then we think they are the truth. And then she says, what's really interesting, and I believe this is true, most people blame themselves for their unhappiness. And we often use words like should. We should on ourselves, right? I should be happy. I should feel grateful. I should blah, blah, blah. And so we think there's something wrong with us, when really what's wrong, she says, is that it's our culture. It's this kind of cultural conditioning that's problematic. And she also says that it feels inevitable. She says, even if you can name it, how can you move past it? And what should you be seeking out instead? And I think one of the most important words there is seek. And we'll talk about where you're seeking that happiness. And she says, and this is also important, individualism is a core contributor to the old happy. And if you live in the United States, you know that we are a very individualist culture. It's every person for themselves, get ahead at all costs. It's very competitive, and capitalism and the whole capitalism ethos has really taught us that. So everyone's compelled to look out for themselves, motivated to prioritize our own wants and needs. And oftentimes, I know I don't speak for everybody here, treating people as a means to an end. And our culture, that's not how we're going to thrive. And I do believe, and I've seen evidence, a lot of people just aren't happy, aren't satisfied. Mental illness has gone through the roof, and so has alcohol and drug addiction and other substance use addictions. So being separate means we have to carry all these burdens by ourselves, and there's no support system to sort of pick us up when we're struggling. And so being separate limits our ability to foster and deepen relationships with others. And that is our greatest source of happiness. And so I think a lot of people feel lonely. I know during the pandemic, when people were cooped up, they went berserk, and I don't blame them. They weren't able to meet people and go anywhere. And so being separate is also a way, it separates us from ourselves. So we're not only separated and disconnected from others, but we've lost the connection with that deep inner self. And as we say in positive intelligence terms, that's our inner sage, or that maybe that light, or that divine wisdom, or whatever you like to call it. It's something not you, but it is part of you anyway. So it is you, and it's not you. It's not your egoic self. It's your divine self. And so she says that's the shift we need to make, is really embracing not only ourselves, but others in community and interdependence. And she also reminds us that we all have gifts. We are human, and that's what makes us special. And people love us despite or because of our faults and vulnerabilities and our talent. What can we do? What can we offer other people? And the wisdom, what we have learned. So I just wanted to start off with that. And so, Julie, do you have any comments on anything about that based on your own experience in psychology or coaching?
Yes, definitely. Before we jump into that, though, I just wanted to recognize the sacredness of this space, calling
Mm,
in a sense of sacredness, um, and just recognizing that this discussion is very sacred
mm.
around happiness, around what we want and what we need. And so just taking a moment to come back to ourselves, to put a hand on your heart. And I just encourage the listeners to listen from this point of versus gathering information, maybe really a piece of a nugget of truth that they could take home with them to embody. Um, yeah, and just really calling in our ancestors, guides, whoever you believe in, and tapping into that sacredness that lives within us, our higher selves, if you want to call that, the universe, God, and
Inner
just
sage, the
recognizing,
divine.
yes, inner sage. And um, yeah, and the reason that you're here is to gain something and really remember something about yourself, that this happiness is your birthright, that we all have this ability to be happy. It's not just some people are happy and you're stuck not being happy if you feel you're an unhappy person.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, basically all the points you made are points that I completely believe in, that we can learn, that we can seek it out and prioritize this happiness, that we can invest in it, that we can believe in it. And that's how we will find it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think belief is important that we can. I think a lot of people, and I will include myself in this category, I used to think happy was out there, and that if I had the right guy or the right husband or the right this or the right money in my bank account or the right job or the right friends or the right place to live, that that's what would make me happy. And so there's a phrase, I'll be happy when, or I'll be happy if, and, if X happens or if X doesn't happen. And so when we have to stick happiness out there as something to be gotten on a particular timeline, there's never going to be a when, because we always live in the present moment. And, you talked about calling in and reaching inside. And so happiness is what resides in here. It's not going to be out there somewhere.
Exactly. And this is really the work that I think is lacking in our country and a lot of places, is this connection to self, connection to
Mm-hmm.
something deeper than our ego, than our external wants, and to really recognize that we can find this the sense of happiness, the sense of contentment within us,
Mm-hmm.
and really defining what happiness means for you, because it's just a broad nebulous term, right? Like, what is happiness to you? What do you want to feel in your life? What do you want to prioritize? What are your values? Are you living your values? Um,
Yep.
and really, for me, happiness boils down to self love,
Mm-hmm.
to having self acceptance, self compassion, self forgiveness, and really learning about those things. What does it mean to fully love yourself no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter what's going on in your life? And from that place, we can build happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
also happiness comes a lot in just recognizing the beautiful little things that happen day to day, the momentary bits of contentment that
Mm-hmm.
we can tap into um, when we're present. So that's a big important part of being happy, is being mindful, is being present, being aware. You can't feel happiness if you're not aware of it and in your body. It's like making your coffee and watching the
Mm-hmm.
steam rise, or looking out a window and looking at flowers or trees, and adding those little bits of contentment into your cup throughout the day.
Yeah, I've been staring at the azaleas where I live, and they're so pink and so rich. And I love spring because everything's in bloom. And I am also a sports official. So when I'm out on the field on a day, hopefully not a rainy one, all I can think of is I am so lucky that I am out on this field serving athletes to the best of my ability. Who wouldn't want to get paid to stand on lovely grass,
Mhm.
surrounded by lovely trees, surrounded by lovely young men and women who are trying their best to be athletes? I do baseball and softball. So I feel really lucky. And I want to go back to this idea of loving yourself, because you're right. If we're not mindful and right in the moment, we've got a foot in the past and a foot in the future, and neither of them are even here right now. But if we don't love who we are, and that's a hard ask, I will say, because it took me 5 decades to get there. But that's where it has to start, I think, because if I don't love myself and I don't love things about myself, then I'm always going to be looking externally for validation or happiness. So I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yes. So, if you don't mind, I have a short paragraph
Mhm.
to read that basically encapsulates this self love.
Okay.
It's kind of like a little meditation. So, self love is all you need to be happy. Imagine how amazing your life would be if you created a world in which you were always good enough, always wanted, always welcome, no matter what others are doing or saying on the outside. A world in which you are allowed to make mistakes without shaming you. A world in which you weren't responsible for everyone else's wants and needs and feelings. Imagine a world in which you didn't feel guilty for feeling good when someone else felt bad. Imagine a world in which you were always allowed to love and forgive yourself and offer yourself compassion, no matter how badly you messed up. A world in which you saw every difficulty as a learning experience. Imagine a world in which it was okay for you to say no, to set boundaries, to have your own preferences, your own values, your own priorities, to set your own parameters of success. Imagine a world in which you took time and space for yourself to dream, to connect with others with similar interests and values. Imagine a world in which you helped others by sharing your gifts and your truths. A world in which you felt safe enough to be authentic, to be vulnerable, and ask for help, to just be you. Imagine that this is a world that you could actually create if you believed in it, prioritized it, invested in it. Yeah, that's basically for me what happiness is, just loving ourselves, a sense of it's okay in the world, just trusting yourself, trusting others in the world that things are going to work out, even when there's some difficulties.
Yeah. So everything that you just read encapsulates positive intelligence. I have been doing this podcast for almost a year now, and I've talked about the judge that's between our ears, and I call it a ventriloquist because it may sound like us, but it isn't us. It's not the true self. It's this judge who, we've come to believe and telling us we're not good enough, telling us we're stupid, telling us we can't possibly do that, or we judge other people or we judge circumstances. And then, talking about that you set the parameters for your success. So we don't have to be the hyperachiever, which is one of our saboteurs. We can learn that we don't have to please everybody else because people pleasing is also one of our saboteurs. And we don't have to be victims of our circumstances and so on and so forth. There are 9 accomplices, and you basically touched on all of those. And that's what positive intelligence teaches us to do. We have two basic neural pathways. We have the one where the judge and his accomplices live, or her accomplices. And that's kind of what I call the rabbit hole. And then we have this sage path. And so positive intelligence teaches us to go down that sage path, to have empathy for ourselves and others, to innovate when we've made a mistake and take away some lessons and navigate our way through life and find the path that works for us, that doesn't harm other people and ourselves. So I love that. Did you write that?
Yes. I get a
Okay.
lot of channeled writing.
Oh, you
And
do?
so,
Oh, wow. Will you share that? Can I add that to the show notes?
yes, sure. I have
Okay,
lots of
great.
it.
Okay.
So, what helped me actually to tap into some of this happiness was honestly plant medicine, such
Mm,
as psilocybin, even just microdoses of it. Taking that, I started to receive these messages. Before, I never used to write, and now I write every day, journals and journals. There's something that sometimes helps us get past that inner critic using in a responsible, in a ceremonial type way with intention that I found very helpful. And I feel like what you were talking about, the inner critic, is very important for women to address and
mm-hmm.
marginalized communities in general. Um, that women generally see themselves as less competent. They underestimate themselves. They feel the need to people please. This is really why I'm interested in working with women and midlife women, especially because at midlife, also it's a difficult time. It's a time of transition where you're getting older, the body is changing for women, and there's a lot of messages from society about getting your anti-aging cream and
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And
feeling invisible, right? And so I really want women to see this time as a time to reinvent yourself and to tap into this happiness. It doesn't have to go downhill from here. Like as you mentioned, it took me 50 years to figure out too about this self-love thing.
yeah.
And but once you get it, doesn't matter how long it takes if you invest in it. Like really
Yeah.
take the time. It's going to be so worth it. It's so magical and beautiful to know that you can count on yourself
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
always having the negativity in there.
Right. And, even though it has been a long time, I don't regret it insofar as I've been able to learn from it. And one of the things that I like to do when I help people is remember that I've been over the coals of pain and trauma. And so, because of that, and because I've been able to learn from it and process it, I hold my hand out to the next person who needs help getting over those hot coals. And the promise is that you will get over them. You just have to ask for help. You need to want the help. You can stand at the other side of it and wonder if you can cross them, or you can say, I need some help. And then we hold out our hands and say, yeah. And speaking of hot coals, I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this subject for a long time. There's something about what if my daughter is really sick and dying, or what if my dad just died in a car crash, or what if my brother X, or, what about all of the things going on in the world that are tragic? How can I be happy? And one thing is, it's not a zero-sum game. In other words, I can be happy and still care for you and love you and pray for you or whatever, and sympathize and empathize. And I know somebody whose daughter is waiting for a transplant of a major organ. And I mentioned that I'm going to be doing this podcast, and she went into a discussion of how difficult it has been for her to watch her daughter suffer and wait for this very important life-saving transplant. And then I wondered, how can we be happy in the face of personal tragedy?
Yes. I mean, this is something that we all face.
Mm-hmm.
When it's happening to us, we feel that we're being singled out, that we're the only ones going through it. When in actuality, whatever you're facing, divorce, separation, a sick child, um, financial issues, there's millions of people going through that same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is something that can help people too, is to tap into that, knowing that this is the human condition, old age, sickness, death, as the Buddhists say. And so learning how to deal with it in a way that adds to our growth, to our compassion, and to our desire to help others, as you mentioned, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
seeing it even in the moment. Well, I hope to learn something from this, and I hope to share what I'm learning with other people going through the same experience. And community is so important. Reaching out to others who are going through the same thing, support groups, or
Mm-hmm.
um, really talking about it. Because if we're sitting in our corners alone on our phones, we're just going to feel more isolated and lost. When in actuality, there's so many people that want to help and that you can reach out to.
Yeah,
Um,
people do
yeah.
want to help, don't they? I
Yes.
love it when people ask for help. It's like, yes, of course I'll help you. Yeah, I hate to
Yes,
see
of
people
course, as
trying to
coaches and
go it
therapists, we want
alone.
to do
Well, yeah.
it. But I feel like that is our natural state, to want
Mm-hmm.
to help. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something that we forget somehow, that when we're in the middle of needing something, especially as women again, we don't want
Mm-hmm.
to bother anybody. We're used to being the caregivers, and
Mm-hmm.
really seeing it as it can be a gift to somebody else, to allow them to help you, to support you, to because if you think about times that you really helped somebody or offered them compassion, or maybe you had
Mm-hmm.
a little extra money to give them,
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that you feel bad about,
Mm-mm.
right? Generally, it's something that makes us feel good when we think about it later in life, like, wow, I was really able to help that person.
Yeah,
So just remembering that if you're needing help, that it's not a shameful thing to need help.
right. Think of it as giving another person an opportunity to do this
Yeah,
as opposed to putting them out. you
right. And it's a
know,
way for people to grow. I feel like that
yeah.
is a problem in our country, especially around giving and generosity. And it doesn't have to be just money, but giving of our time, giving of compliments,
Mm-hmm.
giving of patience. Uh, there's so many ways we can give, and so many people who need. And we have so much in this country. What we're lacking is what you said, is this connection to deep connection to self, to spirit, to these entities or energies that live
Mm-hmm.
within us and around us that we can tap into, such as generosity, compassion, forgiveness, love. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, forgiveness is a good one. We often ruminate on our mistakes and our character flaws. And I know that when I was doing that, I was A, never in the present, and B, I was really navel gazing. I was only thinking about myself. Other people were not going around thinking, oh, Jamie's got a lot of flaws. I was
right.
doing that. And so when I could get out of myself and be with other people and notice that we all have the same kinds of things going on in our lives. They may not be perfectly the same, but we all have the same kinds of emotions and we all cry and we
Hmm.
all kind of get lonely sometimes or whatever. And sometimes we can be angry and say something we didn't mean. But that doesn't make us bad people. It doesn't make us unlovable. It doesn't make us not compassionate. It makes us human. And when we're in community, we can, be open and talk about it and share that,
Yes.
and when something difficult happens and you share it, you find out you're not alone.
Yes. And you help others to know that
Mm-hmm.
they're not alone. And anything that happens, if you make a mistake or um, like coming on here and you were saying, oh, my thing isn't quite right on Facebook. Well, that inspires me to do like I could do a podcast. It's okay if you don't have everything exactly perfect. And yeah, just allowing ourselves to be human is so important.
Yeah.
And really what you mentioned about getting out of our heads, I think is important too. And just so self-focused can
Mm-hmm.
really block our happiness. When you're more in a flow state, finding the things that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, like your sporting, coaching, um, and just allowing the flow, being in music or singing, that's when we find moments of happiness, or just being out in nature is such a way of getting out of our heads and walking and just enjoying the beauty around us.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, letting go
My
of
son
this.
does that. He goes to this park and he climbs to the very top. It's called East Rock Park in New Haven. And he finds his joy in nature and he comes back a changed person. He might go out in a bad mood. He comes back chill and zen.
Well, science shows that, right? That just being out in nature is healing. It calms our nervous system. It's like a type of meditation. So that's definitely high on the list for happiness. I would recommend anybody being in nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And feeling
just,
rooted and grounded, right? So if we talk
yeah.
about the energy, the main energy system of our chakras, the root chakra, if we're not grounded, the rest of them, it all has to work, the connection to source all the way down to the root. And one day when I was at that park running, I just took off my shoes and socks and stood by a tree on the roots and just grounded myself just to feel like I was part of that tree.
Yes, because we are part of the tree. We are part of
Mhm.
nature that we
Mhm.
forget. And being out in it, we realize it's vast and we're just a small entity and we don't have to take ourselves so seriously.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so that's important too. Just letting go of the seriousness of all this and knowing
Mhm.
we can just play a little more with this life. Experiment, see what you like, what you don't like. And
Turn
just
the music
having,
up.
yeah,
Dance
just
in your
having a
living
run.
room.
Yeah, just I think that's a thing too when you get in midlife or a lot of people are stuck in these patterns and the
Mhm.
way you've done things and some newness, just getting out and trying to remember what you liked as a kid or just this world is for us to explore and have fun in. And
Mhm.
just learning to have a nice running commentary as you're exploring, that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be perfect. And trying different
Yes.
things. Oh, I didn't like that. That didn't work. No, I'm sad one day. That's being human.
Yeah.
It'll it'll pass. Riding the waves.
And yeah,
So yeah.
you can sit in the sadness. You don't have to push it away. And there's again that old happy of I should be happy. I'm not a paraplegic or I'm not sick or I don't have X disease or I don't, live in poverty or whatever. that doesn't mean you can't be happy, and we don't have to chase it, but it is a choice. It is a choice to say, yeah, I'm going to go ground myself. I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to enjoy this cup of coffee, every single taste, every sip, or I am going to go stare at azaleas because they're so beautiful.
Yes, that's, I think it is finding your unique recipe, like writing
Mm-hmm.
down the things that work for you. Maybe it's just standing out in nature. Maybe it's breath work or tapping,
Mm-hmm.
affirmations. There's so many ways to tap into this happiness and joy. And seeing it, as I mentioned before, there's different levels of happiness versus this blissed out state, just little bits of contentment, and you're filling your bucket with it throughout the day. And that's how you will become a happy person.
Yeah. And this isn't, a lot of people have talked about toxic positivity. This isn't about pretending that things are okay if they're not. It's really about that. That's what the title of the podcast, Happiness is an Inside Job. And so we're out of time. We could probably talk for hours.
Yes.
So
I love this topic.
I do too. I do too. And maybe we'll have you on again for a different topic another time. But I
Yes, I would
wanted
love that.
to, yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for sharing your writing with us. And there are a few comments, and um, people are writing really lovely things here about sharing sharing the poem, or it felt like a poem to me, that you wrote, and just loving yourself unconditionally, and how people feel like this message that we're giving is resonating with them. Thank you so much for those of you who are commenting. Really appreciate that. And so let me just pull up something that I think is fun, and it only be okay.
Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along.
That song always makes me happy, and I always dance to it.
Yes, I
So,
love it. I just
yeah.
want to leave the listeners knowing just a message that you are so loved, and just to know that there is this inherent love within you that is wanting you to be happy, and just start talking to it,
Hmm.
and it's available to you.
And accept it, right?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Julie, and many blessings on your continued journey to ordination with the plant medicine. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you're tuning in live, and if you're watching this after, thank you for watching, and comments are welcome. And take care until next week.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.